So I would like to begin the session by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land in which we meet today, and I would also like to pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging. And now before I get into the fascinating world of skills mapping your workforce, I did want to start by telling you a story of Samantha, who's a young woman that I had the privilege of meeting last year and who has generously given me permission to share her story today. So Sam is a former police officer from the UK Metropolitan Police. She was 24 when she was first diagnosed with a neurological disorder that impacted her movement. One of the greatest impacts of Sam's disability was, of course, on her employment, and she was no longer able to perform as an operational police officer. And as you can imagine, for a young woman who had always been very active and who dreamed of a life of service, it was a crushing realization that she could no longer work doing the job that she loved. She was placed on back office duties and doing lots of admin work. And while she still had a job, she was being underutilized and feeling really undervalued. And her sense of worth plummeted, and she just was not feeling like she was in a good place in her life. So With You With Me was first introduced to Samantha through one of our not-for-profit disability partners in the United Kingdom, who knew that our mission was to solve underemployment. And Samantha really was the perfect example of someone who had the potential to do more. She'd never worked outside of law enforcement before, but we saw her potential to apply the same skills and expertise that she'd honed through 8 years as a cop to an entirely different context. So we worked with Samantha to map her skills, aptitude, and personality style, and identified that she had a high propensity to excel as a software developer. She'd obviously never worked in software development or even technology before, but she had the natural intelligence to learn the skills and the technical aspects of the role quickly, as well as the leadership and life experience from her law enforcement days. So she did around 130 hours of self-paced online training, and she got her accreditation as a full stack Java developer. But that was only part of the solution. We also needed to find an organisation that was really willing to go out on a limb and look at skills-based hiring. And we found that with Northrop Grumman. And for those of you who don't know Northrop Grumman, they're a huge global aerospace technology company. They're in the UK, Australia, United States. And Northrop Grumman was facing a digital skills deficit and just couldn't find the tech talent that they needed, which we can all relate to. And they saw the skills that Samantha had. They took a leap of faith by throwing out the traditional recruitment requirement they had for their technologists to have a degree or prior experience. And they placed her into the team in an entry-level developer role. So Samantha's been at Northrop Grumman for just over 12 months. And in that time, she's been promoted to now lead a team of developers. Northrop Grumman have since brought in an additional 8 skills-based hires like Samantha to their tech team, and they have plans for more to come. So while this story I start with is focused on hiring diverse talent with potential rather than the benefits of skills-based talent management, I did want to start with it because it's a really great example of how an individual's hidden or unexplored skills are potentially an organization's greatest untapped resource. People are often so much more capable of what their resume or job description outlines, and acknowledging this and even operationalizing it is how we can solve a slew of workforce challenges, from filling skills gaps to reducing churn. So the idea of uncovering latent workforce talent isn't groundbreaking, and nor is this notion of skills, but I think what's really been missing in a professional sense has been the framework that legitimizes the strategy for an organization. So something that you can trust and rely on. And essentially, that's the process of mapping skills, understanding an individual's potential, and mapping them to practical applications in the workplace. And of course, having a way to prove that an individual is indeed capable of delivering on the skills that they have, because that's what de-risks it all for an organization embarking on skills-based employment. And that is what I'm going to delve into with you today. So just a bit of quick background into who I am. My name is Cia Kouparitsas, and I'm the Chief Customer Officer at With You With Me. We are a social impact tech company that is all about solving underemployment, which is when someone is employed but not working to their full potential. And we see underemployment everywhere in society and in most workplaces, but most commonly it's in underrepresented communities and groups. So people who may not have been afforded the same opportunities to get a foot in the door or followed a traditional K-12 education path. And we do lots of work in particular with groups including neurodivergent individuals, Indigenous communities, youth, refugees, and increasingly women in tech. We did start off trying to solve underemployment in the veteran space. Our founder was a veteran who saw his former comrades really struggle with transition, as they were often overlooked for roles in the corporate world because their skills were not recognised as transferable. And CV bots often blocked these guys from even qualifying for an interview. And at the time, there was significant demand for tech skills, which of course we're still seeing today. And we thought if we can make veterans technologists, then they have a path to a fulfilling and frankly future-proof career. So what we did was create a technology platform that draws on an approach honed by the country's largest employer, which is the military. And we decided if the military can use aptitude testing, skills mapping, and specialized training to get ordinary people doing extraordinary things, then so too can other organizations. So that's what our technology does. It tests, it maps, it trains, and it deploys people into roles. And our model has proven so effective in supporting diverse individuals into tech careers that we have had demand from organizations wanting to take that same approach to their internal workforces. So today we're aiming to solve underemployment at scale by helping employers to uncover and mobilize untapped potential and skills in their own workforce. And this brings me to the importance of skills-based workforce management. And to understand while skills-based talent management or workforce management is such a rapidly growing trend, you just need to look at the market. I've got some stats here, but we've all seen it and heard it, lived it. We are in a skills shortage, particularly when it comes to the all-important digital and tech skills, which are really quickly becoming the bedrock of the majority of roles, not to mention the growing prevalence of things like AI. And at the same time, we're facing a really tough economic environment, which means we can no longer just go to market and lure in top talent. Budgets are constrained and many organizations are dealing with things like hiring freezes. But I do think that the skills shortage is only partially to blame. It may be an unpopular opinion, but I do think most organizations aren't clear on where their genuine gaps exist, what their digital needs really are, and what abilities their workforce already possess outside of the job description, of course. And that latter point is one, as many employers don't realize that the capabilities they're seeking in the market are often lying dormant within their own workforce. Without a clear understanding of where your organization currently stands and where you need it to be when it comes to workforce skills, it's almost impossible to accurately identify and fill critical voids, no matter the state of the labor market. And this is where workforce skills mapping can be used by your organization to obtain an accurate view of your current capabilities and productivity, the skills that are required for optimal performance, both now and in the future, and any gaps that need to be filled. So when we're talking about what skills-based talent management is, in a nutshell, and I'm sure many of you are familiar with it, it's an approach to human resources management that's all about identifying, developing, and managing the skills and capabilities held by existing employees in an organization. In skills-based talent management, the focus is on the specific and skills and knowledge that employees possess and how they can be developed and utilized to meet the needs of an organization. It involves creating a comprehensive inventory of skills and competencies that employees possess, as well as identifying the skills that are needed for future success. And skills mapping identifies exactly which tasks and requirements are crucial to both a role and an organization, and which employees could be upskilled or transferred to fill these critical capabilities. And having a comprehensive outline of the skills and competencies required for employees to reach that next level means that as an organization, you can create a really clear pathway for professional development and enable greater talent mobility within the organization as well. Well-executed skill mapping allows your organization to maintain a consistent measure of skills and competencies. It provides a framework for managing that professional development that I spoke about, career progression and promotion. And it also helps level up the workforce and deliver positive social impact by creating opportunities for those people like Samantha, who I mentioned earlier, who may never have been considered for a role before. From a process perspective, in terms of how to reap the greatest benefits from skills-based talent management, I'm going to take you through 3 key ideas, which is firstly, how to establish a skills framework, then exploring your workforce to find hidden potential and skills, and finally, bridging the gap between the skills you have with the skills you need, both now and in the future with your existing workforce. So establishing a skills framework for your organisation, the popularity of skills frameworks really has exploded in recent times for the simple reason that many organisations have had no consistent way to grade and measure their roles. In an IT department alone, there may be 100 different role descriptions circulating that don't allow for progression, moving laterally, or real role accountability. So firstly, you need a universal way of grading, defining and measuring roles. And there are a number of skills mapping frameworks organisations can use to create standardised roles. And a great place to start is digital roles, as they're growing in demand and future-proof. And the process for understanding key competencies is quite simple. So I'm going to keep with that focus today. But having said that, you can skills map across any role, any department within an organisation. So I'm sure many of you have heard of the skills framework for the information age, or SOPHIA, as it's commonly referred to as. For those who haven't, SOPHIA is an industry standardized global skills and competency framework. And the thing I really like about SOPHIA is it provides a common language and structure for defining the skills required by business and technology professionals at every level to design, implement, manage, and protect data and technology. The framework has 7 different levels of responsibility, and it covers many skills and behaviours, which you can see there on the slide. For individuals, the benefits of a framework like SOPHIA is they can clearly understand the skills and the attributes required for digital roles to identify their own core strengths and areas of development, and to focus their efforts on developing skills that are going to be most valuable to them for their career path. But for organisations, SOPHIA really takes the guesswork out of what skills are required for what role, and it helps match people to positions based off what they can actually do rather than whether they have X years of experience or a certain degree. It really is a game-changing approach. And just as an example, we even have the Australian government has recently mapped all of their digital roles and tech roles to the SOPHIA framework. I won't go into too much more detail, but if you are interested in learning more, there's a really great SOPHIA ebook that you can download. I've just popped that QR code on the screen. You can scan it with your phones. And SOPHIA is by no means the only framework, but I really do believe it's the best when it comes to consistent views across the organisation. So in terms of how it works in practice, I'm going to share with you some of the programs that we've been working on, both here in Australia and around the world. And I'm going to start with Leonardo, which is another defence prime. So Leonardo came to us wanting to create a flexible workforce where talent could easily be moved across verticals in the business as and when needed. They wanted their employees growing in a way where they would be ready to tackle the challenges of the future while benefiting from investment in upskilling and a clearer view of available career opportunities. They also wanted to improve the accuracy of how they identified and filled their skills gaps. So we've been working with Leonardo's Head of Learning and Development in the UK to review their existing workforce framework, which features around 700 roles across a range of areas. Initially, we focused on their 5 key growth areas, being software engineering, systems engineering, electronics engineering, IT, and cyber. And for context, in systems engineering alone, they had around 63 different job descriptions, which demonstrates the challenge they were dealing with in terms of a consistent approach to skills. And using SOPHIA, we distilled that down into 40 core skills that are required in total across all roles and at different levels. The great part is that all these roles can be clearly mapped to SOPHIA competencies. So we were able to create a really methodical, standardized way for the business to assess what skills were required for each position and what additional skills an individual would need to learn or demonstrate to step up to that next level. And this is a bit of an example of that in practice. I've got up here the assessment and scoring for a software engineer. Jason undertook SOPHIA assessments as well as the With You, With Me broader assessment suite, which includes Big 5 DISC and aptitude testing matched to skills. So what skills are you naturally inclined to learn quickly? And you can see here a very clear picture of his skills match for his current role as a software engineer, as well as the path for him to step up to a senior software engineer. So in tandem with building this framework, we're also assessing the skill sets of Leonardo's existing staff in these departments, people like Jason, to accurately identify what skills they have and where there are actually gaps, not just where there are blind spots or they think they may have a gap. And essentially, once we put that framework in place, it becomes the single source of truth for skills and competencies across all digital roles, and the foundation on which effective organisational-wide training programs can be designed and implemented, and also hiring. So understanding when they would need to bring new talent into the organisation and what skills that may be for particular teams. Which brings me to step 2, assessing your workforce to uncover hidden potential. Now, there's a number of ways that you can do this. Firstly, if you've mapped against Cia, it's a relatively straightforward process to assess individuals in your organisation against this framework. And this is generally a self-assessment with a manager review or verification. On our platform, it takes around 15 to 30 minutes for the employee and for the manager to each do an assessment of skills against Cia. And the great thing with these assessments are that it will provide insight into where an individual currently sits on a competency scale and make recommendations for the training or support that may be required to move up to a new level or role, or even to fill a capability gap that may exist for the current role that they're operating in. And then when you combine skills assessment with aptitude and personality testing, like the DISC Big Five that I mentioned before, you're also able to identify opportunities for someone to mobilise internally into an area or role that they may have not considered before, or maybe not worked, had prior experience in before. So looping back to the earlier example with Leonardo, and specifically the system engineering area of the IT department, we used our suite of assessments to baseline the top performing employees who were already in the high demand system engineering roles. And this enabled us to create a profile of what skills, aptitude, and soft skills are ideally suited to those positions. And the thinking here is that if we have data that demonstrates the competencies and traits of top performing systems engineers, we can use this to identify others in the organisation who may previously not have been considered for that kind of role. So it gives the team options when they're looking at their workforce, and perhaps some departments that are oversubscribed, to be able to identify, upskill, and redeploy talent to keep employees in their talent ecosystem. There is another great organisation that we're working with globally, which is another good example of the benefits of the approach as well. They recently, or last year I should say, worked with us to test around 2,000 people in a financial call centre, which is typically a very transient with high attrition rates. They had a real problem with this, actually, with around 43% of their call centre staff typically leaving within 6 months. And obviously that's a huge cost to the business considering the time to onboard. So the idea here is that they could identify those individuals in the call centre who'd already onboarded and are familiar with the organisation and their processes, and identify those who had the propensity to quickly learn tech skills and be mobilised and promoted into other areas of the business. We've been upskilling these individuals to Cia Level 3, which is still entry level, across data, cyber, and project management roles. So essentially now, as part of their onboarding, they can test their call centre staff in these entry-level admin roles, provide them with options for career progression, and provide them with the training plan that they can have to progress into a new role. So they do this training as part of their professional development plans over the first 6 months, making the call centre essentially a farm for tech talent. And the process, including the industry certified training that makes them proficient for the digital role, works out to be under $1,000 per person. So while it doesn't solve the issue of people leaving the call centre per se, it does help them solve their skills gap, fill IT roles for under $1,000, and build a highly engaged and diverse workforce. And it's actually contributed to reducing call centre churn by just over 20%, which is a great result. Lastly, Fujitsu here in Australia is another organisation that is doing some really great work in this space. We've been supporting one of their key programs around boosting their internal hires and mobility to keep people engaged within the organisation. Our platform is offered through Fujitsu's Skills for Life portal. So far, I think around 216 people have completed an assessment to uncover which digital and tech roles within the organisation they may be suited for, and then they're provided with the option to train or upskill. We've been doing it for just over 8 months, and in that time, internal hires and promotions at Fujitsu rose from 24% to 36%, which I think is an increase. I've got on the screen 12%, which is great to see. So lastly, I would just like to share with you a final point that I think is a very exciting new frontier in the space, which is being able to use the insights from this approach to not only understand and optimize your current workforce, but to help build your future workforce too, by identifying the changing skills you may need down the track. And the best way to explain this concept is through another story, so bear with me. This is a project we did with the Australian Army to show the impact that evolving technologies will have on their traditional jobs and how they may need to augment their workforce to meet those needs. We worked with a great company called Fathom AI to do this. They apply machine learning to billions of data points to generate dynamic workforce insights, such as new work models, economic disruption, and how AI is going to reshape the world of work. So working with Fathom, we examined both the impact of automation and augmentation on the Army's workforce over the next 15 years and investigated how this would change their people landscape. So it was all about focusing on people, the humans, rather than the systems and processes. And when we speak about automation here, we're talking about the ability for technology to fully replace a job or significant components of a job. That would mean the job had to be altered significantly or have the individual redeployed, essentially being replaced by technology. It's important to note that this is often more of a replacement of components of a job rather than the entire job itself. And a great example of that is the automation of payroll functions and capabilities. Augmentation, on the other hand, is the close collaboration of people and machines to inform or enhance tasks. So a basic example here is to think of a vehicle GPS. Drivers need to learn how to use the technology, but it improves the efficiency of how they drive greatly. So we assess the total impact of automation and augmentation on the full-time Army workforce over the next 15 years. And during that time, almost 50% of the entire workforce will be affected by both automation and augmentation. More than 20% of all roles are expected to interact with augmented technologies, and that's actually going to provide a 30% capacity gain for the workforce. So really valuable insights when it comes to workforce planning. And there are two key takeaways when thinking about skills mapping and workforce change here. The first is the addition of new jobs to build or implement technology as the changes occur. And secondly, the addition of new skills to existing jobs or skills that people will need to learn, grow, and implement the technologies over time. So armed with this insight and with a skills framework to define the roles and skills required, and a picture of their employees that includes aptitude and personality, they're in a really strong position to guide the future workforce strategy. And given the recruitment challenges also being faced by Defence, but also more broadly, growing existing talent through training is probably the best path forward to meeting the challenges coming down the line from the digital world. So I know I've covered a lot of content and stories today, and there were a few resources that I mentioned that I've popped up on the screen, which you can access by scanning the QR code. But as I mentioned at the start, and if you're not here, I will be happy to share this slide deck and the recording. If you just want to pop your email address in the chat, we'll make sure that you are on the list. I've also popped my contact details up on the screen, and also our Regional Vice President, Ian Handley, who is also one of our trained Sophia practitioners and doing a lot of work in this space here in Australia and also globally. I hope the information I've shared today, I know it's a lot to absorb, but also some of the great work being undertaken by some of our partners around the world has helped you think differently about the problem we're facing and the possible solution. I truly do believe that an organisation's greatest untapped resources are their people. And in most cases, for most organisations, there is so much potential and latent talent just waiting to be explored within the existing workforce. So on that, I would like to finish by taking you back to Samantha, who I mentioned at the start of the session, because without a skills-based approach to talent management, Sam never would have dreamed that she could have been a software engineer, and Northrop Grumman would still be looking to find that hard-to-find person in a highly competitive market. And today, Samantha is one of their highest performers, leading a team of developers. And while she's certainly one of a kind, I have no doubt that there are other people out there like Samantha in all of your organisations today who are just waiting for someone to see their potential and give them the opportunity to step up.